Okay. Well, we're just gonna get started since it's 9:30. Oh, and I'm gonna sit down because the Zoom, was just looking at my midsection when I stood up, so I'm gonna sit, even though it feels very awkward to sit down. I'm Martha Dennison. I'm Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees. Lester Lloyd is the Chair of the Board of Library Trustees. And for the last couple of years, we have been holding candidate forums in anticipation of town elections because we feel it's important that folks in town get educated and engaged when we have town elections. Obviously, this year on our town ballot, we have the override question. And so we felt, even though it's different, that it was important for us to have an opportunity for folks at the to come to the library and engage in a conversation about the override question. Of course, the override question really doesn't exist by itself, right? So, so we invited the schools in the town to come and talk about the budget. There are two budgets, what's called the balanced budget or the 5A budget, and then the override budget. So what we asked them to talk to us about is what's in those budgets, what happens if it's just the balanced budget, what happens, what's in the override budget, and why do you feel we need that, right, with that override? And then 20 minutes for Danielle to talk about the budgets, 20 minutes for Fernando to talk about the town's budgets, and then another 20 minutes to talk specifically about the override and what that is and what that means and how that process works. So that's our goal today. And then we'd have half an hour for questions, both from the Zoom and from anybody in the audience who has questions. I obviously have a lot of questions, so if you don't have any, I've got my list. And I've referred to these guys, and you probably know them, they're very well known. Superintendent of Schools, Danielle Klingaman. We've got the Assistant Superintendent, Beth Wilcox, and we've got the Director of Business and Finance. Thank you, I just didn't know your title, Lisa. And of course, we've got Select Board Member extraordinaire, Fernando Guitart. So I'm gonna hand this over to Danielle because we need to get into this because it's a big agenda, a lot of things we need to cover in an hour and a half. So I'm gonna hand it over to you. Folks on Zoom, we're gonna have questions, as I said, for the last half hour. So we'll figure out how to engage with that time. Hopefully we can just have you ask your questions, but we'll see if technology works to our advantage at that time.
Okay, great.
Oh, so you need me to.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you everyone for coming. And I do want to say we have our school committee chair, Laurel Deacon, here today, who I would love to have give the opportunity to say a few words as well. But we appreciate the library board inviting us to have a session during the day. We know a lot of the sessions that have taken place have been in the evenings, which is not an ideal time for many people to attend long budget sessions. So I was really hoping that this morning time was better for a lot of people. And so we've been doing budget presentations about FY25 since we've been talking about it for a year, since last town meeting, and we started doing actual budget presentations to the school committee in October with our capital budget, which we had a lot of capital budget needs for the schools this year in both technology and facilities needs, as well as curriculum. And then in November, we did our first presentation to the school committee. So the school committee's been hearing this discussion for a long time. And I think it was really at the end of December when the community really had all the pieces of the budget puzzle from other departments and from the recommendations from Select Board and Finance Committee and Town Manager. So what we are doing today, I'd really like to just give you a consolidated, here's where we are February 28th, because we're a week away from town meeting. And I don't think it's going to be helpful to go through the long budget presentations that we started with. However, all of the budget materials that we've shared and presented since November are available on the school department website under Business and Finance. And there's a section that's called FY26 Budget Information, where there are a ton of exhibits, presentations, and information for, we did some FAQ documents, and we just added a video library today where you can hear directly from us in the front here at the table, as well as from our building principals and from our students talking about what is the state of the schools and what would be the impact of any reductions that the school department would face. So we tried to make those videos under a minute because we know people don't have time to be watching long videos. So they're really quick hits. And so hopefully you can spread the word that, that those are available there. So on today's presentation, Martha, if you could be my slide advancer, that would be great.
I think I can. Well, why are you getting the Doom circle?
Would it let you go scroll down instead of using the arrow?
You just give me the Doom circle.
I think you have to put it in your
Yeah, right, it's up there, yeah. It just doesn't,
Page down.
yeah, that's what I tried, right?
When technology doesn't
Yeah,
work,
right?
what I can do while Martha's trying to advance the slide, I'll just talk about what's on the slide.
Just need to move Zoom box.
Move the Zoom box.
And that black box can move to the other side of the screen and scroll down.
Oh, thank you, Kate.
And if you click into it, you can.
Oh.
Do the down,
Thank you.
because that'll just do one page.
Can I now just point out the fact that I failed to acknowledge the PTAs and the PTOs? I can't believe it. They're sitting there all looking at me and I can't believe I failed to acknowledge that this forum this morning is co-sponsored by Duxbury Public Schools, PTAs and PTOs, which is an amazing opportunity for us. And we'll also partner on the school committee candidate forum later in
Yes.
March.
Thank you, PTOs and
Huge,
PTAs.
thank you.
We have had a couple of meetings with our school council, PTOs and PTAs called the Council of Congress of Councils, and we do plan to hold additional sessions where we really count on our PTAs and school councils to be as informed as possible. So when questions come up from community members in the schools, that they have go-to people who have as much information as they possibly can in everyone's busy lives. But with that, the state of Duxbury Public Schools, and we really emphasize this at the beginning of the school year, that this is really the first year in a long time, since I've been working in Duxbury, that we are what I would consider to be fully staffed and on the road to having evidence-based curriculum programs with vertical alignment from K to 12. The reason for that is for the last 3 school years, we have been funded at close to 4% increase year over year. That has allowed us to, while we have still always looked at efficiencies and whether we have some staffing recommendations, so I will get to that, but due to those 3 years of healthy budget for the school, we were able to get to a place where we've been able to make some real improvements that we were recommending with our strategic planning process back in 2022. We had several years of ESSER funding, which assisted schools with response to pandemic. We were able to purchase PPEs, we were able to purchase plexiglass, all those things that we had in schools to be able to get our students back safely as quickly as possible. That funding allowed us to add 5.5 positions back in the 2022 school year. We knew that those positions weren't necessarily going to be able to be sustained, but we knew at the time we were really post-pandemic. We were trying to address learning loss and making sure that we were doing everything we could to have our students catch up as much as possible with any learning loss that took place during the pandemic. Over the next 2 fiscal years, so FY25 and FY26, which we're currently planning for, we have reduced 13.5 positions due to declining enrollment and looking for operational efficiencies. So we are not an organization that's just trying to keep adding positions because we know with the conversations that have been had across town that we need firefighters, we need police officers, we need to make sure the children's librarian is restored at the library. And so we never want to hold on to positions that we can potentially absorb at the expense of other departments, because we know as the largest employer in town that a good portion of the town employees do work for the school department. So our staffing is at an appropriate level, and I would say that our class size K through 5, as well as in grades 6 to 12, is appropriate. And our special education caseload size, which is really important to us, is at an appropriate range. And we, during our last contract negotiation with our special education staff, it was a real focus area that our special education staff were feeling as though their department wasn't staffed in a manner that allowed them to maximize what our students need who are on IEPs. So with that, we've really focused the past couple of years on ensuring that our special education department has the support that our families need. Families need to be able to reach out to the school if there's a question or a concern, and they reach out to the team chairs. And we now have a team chair at every building. And we now have our special education director who is currently in district with us and not traveling around the region, because we have a part-time out of district coordinator that is able to visit all of the programs that are approximately 30 students who are out of district attend. There's a lot of observations and a lot of team meetings and a lot of contact with families of our most significant students who are in out of district placements. And so it's been a pinch, it's been difficult for our special ed director to be available to families as needed when they're constantly on the road going out to out of district placements. So when we talk about staffing being appropriate this year, that's where we are. We have I can just go back to that just for a second. So we have really focused on evidence-based curriculum. There's been a lot of discussion in town prior to this budget conversation about our ELA program. So we did a pilot last year of several, this school year of several programs, and we were able to, with Dr. Wilcox's help, receive a grant for, how much was our grant for?
We spent approximately $300,000 last year in grant funding.
And so we are always looking out for grants, and it's our administrators that write grants. And so we have received hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants to supplement our operating budget to be able to purchase curriculum materials that are research-based and appropriate for our students. So we're really pleased that a new ELA program will be in place for the fall. And it is, it's been a lot of work, but it's really satisfying to have that happen. We also, for the first time this year, have universal access to full day kindergarten, which is really important to us. And I truly believe that our families shouldn't be burdened with paying for kindergarten tuition, which is one of our grade levels. We would never say 11th grade families, you need to pay thousands of dollars in tuition. And I feel the same way about kindergarten, and I know many others do. Back when many of us were in school, we went to half day K, and it was a different world what we were doing in kindergarten. Nowadays in kindergarten, you really are expected to be reading or pre-reading and having those skills that are going to set you up to be able to be a strong reader, which is the most important thing. And the most important gift that we can give to our kids is a strong reading background. And so when you don't have kids in full day kindergarten, they have a very abbreviated school day with not a lot of developmentally appropriate opportunities to play and interact with their peers and have those social interactions that are so essential in 2025, given the amount of screen time that we are challenged with our children, whether it's an iPad when you're young, and even if you're playing learning games, there's a lot of time that the kids are looking at screens. And school is a great time to be able to interact with your peers and learn how to share and play games together. And when you don't have full day kindergarten, all of that suffers. And so that is an extremely important value to our community and one that we want to be able to offer. And I think we can go to the next slide. And so when we were tasked at the beginning of this school year with all departments needed to prepare a level funded budget to determine what our needs would be and what that would look like. And so when we did the task of what would a level funded budget look like for the school department, we knew that it was going to result in reductions to our current programming. The school budget is 82.4% salaries for people. And we all know that we don't need tons of books and manipulatives to be able to make a difference for kids. What we need is we need people to be able to use those books and those resources to have our students learning. And Beth makes a great point when she talks, every single person that the students encounter, from the time they get on the bus to their bus driver, to the staff that greet them when they're getting off the bus, to everyone that they see until they get to their classroom, plays an important role in our schools. Custodial staff, instructional assistants, office staff, administrators, and our teachers, of course. So we're a people organization, and we're a very small portion instructional materials, and we always look to see if we can supplement our instructional materials costs with grant funding so that we can focus on the people. We have many fixed costs in our school district budget that we have very little control over, just like in our homes when it comes to utility costs and other non-negotiables, where we just have to pay that bill when it comes in. So we are just like any homeowner. We have utilities costs, electric, water, oil, gas. We have approximately 30 students who require really intensive specialized instruction that we are not able to provide in our classrooms in Duxbury Public Schools. The transportation and the out-of-district tuition costs are not regulated by the state. So if we have a child that's in a blank school somewhere in the state, they can just send us a letter, which they do, and they say, we've just calculated that our tuition will increase by $20,000 next year, or they can tell us they have a 17% increase in the tuition, and there's nothing we can do. There's no negotiating with student placements where we can call the Perkins School for the Blind and say, well, we can't have a 17% increase of your already very expensive tuition. If the students require that placement, if they require that service, we are compelled and mandated to pay that. And so we've seen a huge increase in special education transportation and our out-of-district tuition costs. That's just something that we've had to absorb. We also work really hard with our collective bargaining agreements, and so we negotiate typically every 3 years with our largest teacher, our largest unit, which is Unit A, and that's our teachers, specialists, support staff that you see in our schools. And when we do those contract negotiations, our DTA is part of MTA, which is the Massachusetts Teachers Association. And so they're coming in with data about what the appropriate compensation level should be for people doing their job across the state. And we all know during the pandemic, everyone was really understanding how difficult the teacher's job is during that time. And we all want our kids in school. And so that's a process that we have to do carefully when we do it in collaboration with Rainey Reed and with Mary McKinnon, our town manager and finance director, and us at the table and the school committee. It's a negotiation between the school committee and the Unit A. And what we try to do is ensure that we're paying our teachers within an average range. We are not looking to be at a high percentile. We are not ever going in saying we need to make sure Duxbury is the highest paid teachers in the region. We've been trying to get to the 50th percentile so that when we sit at a contract negotiation, our teachers are at the 50th percentile for salary so that we can draw in we can be competitive with our other regional districts. So if the teachers are looking at Norwell and Situate and Duxbury, if they have 3 job offers, we want them to pick Duxbury. And if they're going to look at our contract and see that we are not even at the average market level, it's really hard to make a case and to try to convince teachers to come here because we all know it's wonderful to work here and we love it here. But at the same time, when you're a first-year teacher, you're making the lowest salary you will ever make, and they have to make a decision that's in the best interest of their families and their ability to pay their bills. We all know how difficult that is right now with inflation. So it's really important that we always go into negotiations in good faith, and we don't want to have a negotiation where we are promising our teachers a salary increase that we know we can't afford in town that will result in us then having to turn around and reduce 15, 20, 30 teachers because we signed a new contract that we just simply can't back up. We can't say to the town, well, we just did an incredibly high contract increase and now the town has to figure it out because we all know the town doesn't have the funding to back that up. So this process of override discussion and our budget needs has been really important for us to share with the community that we want to go into our contract negotiations in good faith, and we want to negotiate contracts that the town can afford to pay while we are always trying to be reasonable, but also respecting that our educators should be and deserve to be paid within the average level in the region. So we look at comparable school districts to Duxbury, which the Department of Education gives us a list of school departments that you can compare yourself to. And we look at our regional comparisons because we're competing with Norwell, Situate, Marshfield, Kingston, Silver Lake, when teachers that live in this area are looking for jobs. It's really important. When we did our salary study, it did come out last year that our custodial staff and our instructional assistants were paid well below market level. And our administrators were paid about 10% below market level. So we're able to, those have less of a cost impact. So we are able to make those adjustments gradually over time. And as you know, it was not a popular decision last year. We did look at whether or not outsourcing our custodial department would be in the best interest of the town because of our town crunch in finances. And people were very passionate and upset that we were even considering doing something like that because we certainly value our custodians as much as we value our teachers and anyone else who works in the school department. So the decision was made to not outsource because we value running that department ourselves and not having a different agency come in to do the cleaning of our schools that we'd have less control over. And so that was a decision that we were coming to last year, knowing that we were really hitting a fiscal cliff this year where we had to make some difficult decisions. I wasn't happy about doing that, but my job is to present to the school committee every option that we may have to have cost savings, even if they're unpopular. And so that was hard. And I'm glad that the outcome was what it was, but it doesn't change the reality of where we are today. Go to the next slide.
Danielle, sorry to interrupt, but our time is so short. Could you just
speed it
Focus
up.
on the highlights.
Sorry. I always think I'm gonna talk
There's a
for
lot
5
to
minutes.
talk
Yep,
about.
I will speed it up. So, getting to the point, the level funded budget reductions and impacts to the school department are on the slide. We are facing potentially losing 12 to 18 FTEs. FTEs means, full-time equivalency. It could be somebody that works 1.0 full-time, or it could be portions of our staff's, full-time equivalency. The people that we are at stake of losing are several teachers, reading specialists, up to 5 administrators, instructional assistants, and different tutors and support staff that would impact our ability to do intervention for our students. You can see below on the list, the implications of that level funded budget. Class size will be higher. Our students have had the benefit of course selection, and they bend over backwards at the high school and middle school to give the kids the schedule that they seek in their first choice of classes. We may be having kids have their second or third choice of classes, which isn't ideal. And it sounds fine until it happens to your child and you're sitting there with a schedule that you weren't anticipating looking at when you intended to select classes for your students. Universal free, full day kindergarten is at risk, and operationally, we will suffer with not having the administrative support staff that is ideal in terms of safety and security and providing our families and teachers with the supports they need. Very briefly, Beth, can you just talk about that? We had an increase in funding in 2023 in our community because of Student Opportunities Act funding. That was a reason our town was able to survive another year when this funding became available. So
Sure, so I can speak to the Student Opportunities Act because we're a public school, we're over the oversight from DESE. The Student Opportunities Act required us to look at our inequities and to create a plan to address those inequities. As part of that, we identified 3 components of our school system that we wanted to look at and to work on. And that was implementing universal full day kindergarten. That was the first piece of the Student Opportunities Act. The second piece was implementing evidence-based curriculum. This year, we have illustrative math at the secondary level at the middle school. And we piloted 2 evidence-based literacy programs. And we'd like to move forward funding dependent on implementing CKLA next year. The third piece was innovation career pathways that was implemented, and that is a high school initiative, but also at the middle school. And that implementation was done through a grant. So in addition to the $300,000 grant that we wrote and received from DESE last year for curriculum materials, we received a grant, we wrote a grant and received $275,000 last year for the use and implementation of our career pathways over the next 5 years. So last year alone, we wrote over $600,000 in grants to work on the Student Opportunities Act. And that is separate from the funding that we received as a result of the Student Opportunities Act. And so each year, we wrote our Student Opportunities Act last year for 3 years. Each year, we need to provide an update on where we are with the progress of that implementation. Fortunately, this year, as part of my update, I was able to include the fact that we have universal full day kindergarten and that it is in place. We do have the beginning of evidence-based curriculum in place, and we're working on and have a plan to implement it for next year. We also have the career counselor at the secondary level in place, and that is due to the grant funding. So these pieces of our Student Opportunities Act are dependent on the funding decisions that we make this year as part of our budget decisions. And so on the next slide, we have the funding at not only looking at the inequities for all of the school systems that are in place. The Student Opportunities Act also looks at the funding allocations for each school district in the state. And so they're adjusting the formulas that they are using to provide different, the municipalities with their funding. So we're just sharing the highlights of the total Chapter 70 funding and how it has changed as a result of the Student Opportunities Act and re-looking at the funding allocations.
so we wanted to share that because we have to apply each year for the Student Opportunities Act funding, and that comes in as part of the state funding to support schools. And Duxbury does not receive as much state funding for its school department as other communities do. They expect Duxbury to pay a much higher portion than cities that have a higher poverty rate. So we really count on every dollar that we can get from the state, but it's not guaranteed. And we have to continue to show that we are making good faith efforts in our community to do what we said we were going to do. These Student Opportunities Act application has to be approved, much like all of our grant funded opportunities have to be approved, and we have to back up that we're spending the money the way it's intended.
The one other piece of information that I wanted to share is that we are one of less than 15 communities in Massachusetts that does not have that would not have universal free day kindergarten if that decision was made. So there are less than 15 communities currently that do not have universal full day kindergarten.
The real needs budget, very briefly, talks about what the increase was. And I think that when you look at the 8.5% increase, the reasons for that are listed below. The drivers of that real needs budget were maintaining our current staffing. But keep in mind, we reduced 5.8 positions in this override. We're not asking for additional staffing yet. We've reduced 5.8 positions, maintains access to full day K. We had a slight increase, and when I say slight, it's substantial. It's $100,000, $125,000 that we need to be able to maintain our facilities. And it ensures that our teachers would be compensated at the 50th percentile. Slide. The real needs budget maintains services. There's no new staffing. It maintains the infrastructure needed to operate our school department at the level that it's at. And when we talked to community members and when Envision Duxbury was done in 2019, the community ranked this high quality school system as its #1 community asset, along with the beauty of the land and the beaches. And so that tells us that the community values its high quality public schools, and I'm sure they would say they don't want that to suffer. Student support and intervention will continue to be available at all levels, which is definitely attributed to why we're seeing our student achievement grow. Class size will remain at appropriate levels. Universal kindergarten will be accessible to all students. Our Unit A teaching staff will be compensated within the average range of comparable districts, and our facilities needs will be addressed. There we go. I sped it up. I'm so sorry.
No, that was great.
Thank you.
Martha, before I talk about the town side, maybe any questions online? But
Just can't help
no,
yourself. You gotta be in
but
charge.
sorry.
Not a question.
No,
That's only, would anybody here have any questions about the school
school?
budget while it's still fresh in our minds?
yes, here we go.
Awkward.
Sorry to be bossy.
Someone wrote something on the chat screen.
Oh my God, you're so good, Kate.
Kate's gonna find herself in charge of the Zoom.
Maybe we should switch it. Okay, there we go.
I don't have a question, but I guess I just want to highlight, because I feel like when I talk to people, a big piece of confusion that a lot of people tend to have is on the staffing and the fact that like there's 5 staff being lost either way. And then if the override doesn't pass on top of those 5, it's the 12 to
Yes.
18. So it could be as much as 23
Yeah.
staff that are lost from the school's health, right? I feel like that's for some reason.
I think the 24
confusion.
number was in people's minds, and I think there were some social media posts that were saying the school department could potentially lose 24.5 positions, which was true.
Right.
However, we're losing 5.8 positions no matter what because of our consolidation, because of our declining enrollment. So thanks for pointing that out. We can't afford to lose the 12 to 18 on top of it. Those are not recommended and not positions that we can afford to lose. Martha, did you see the question in
The
the
question
chat?
in
Is
the
it
chat?
something I can?
It was just a comment
Okay.
on whether you can hear me.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, yes.
I know, I've been looking at the, you guys have been doing a great job, and I know it's a difficult task to come up with this reductions. We read about what's happening at the federal level, we realize what's happening in state. And I'm wondering, has the budget been Have you accommodated or adjusted for potential losses in funding from the state and federal that haven't been detailed yet?
So we receive approximately, and this is a ballpark, $750,000 a year in special education federal funding and in consolidated grant that Dr. Wilcox applies for. That's Title I, Title II, and Title IV. We do our best to not fund staffing positions through our grants because they're never guaranteed. And so the town would, in the school department, has about $750,000 in federal grants that we rely on each year to offset our budget costs. But every year, we are kind of at the cusp of qualifying for Title I, and every year we're on the edge of whether or not we will receive our Title I funding. And so that's something that we communicate with the school committee about, to say that, again, we were placed in the warning range for that. So I think that we're always prepared for federal funding because it's not something that's guaranteed. And we do our best to make sure that we have, if federal funding was ever suddenly pulled, we do have our special education reserve account with the town that would have to go through town meeting approval in order for us to access, but we do have a reserve fund in the case of an emergency where an unbudgeted situation takes place because federal funding is pulled or is adjusted for any reason.
I'd say that because I guess I'm concerned. What we have in 2021, I guess, was some adjustments because of those are adjustments because of the pandemic. And yet that funding level continued to stay the same even after the pandemic had gone away. And I know it's easy to add or continue with the budget. Admit we all probably at certain times in our lives have to make adjustments and pull back. And it's not easy. But you expect that because there was so much money thrown in because of the pandemic, that we will be able to take it away again at the end of the pandemic.
Which is why we've reduced 13.5 positions in 25 and 26.
There has been reduction, right, just confirmed, right? There has been reductions since the pandemic.
Yep, and a lot
Staffing.
of the pandemic funding, the ARPA funding was for facilities and structural needs. And so we have been trying to enclose 4 classrooms at the high school that were open, that our students were sitting in the hallway learning. And when we have lockdowns, which we've experienced in town, the students did not have a lockdown they couldn't lock down. They were in the hallway. They would have to scurry into a classroom nearby. So we were able to do some really important infrastructure repairs. We spent a lot on PPEs, hand sanitizer, increased cleaning. A lot of the pandemic funds did go to plexiglass so that we could have separation. And so those funds were not funds that we continued to need. And so when the funding went away, that went away. We still have a lot of hand sanitizer we're trying to get through. But that's why we were really careful by only adding 5 positions during that during that ESSER funding period. We really were asked by the finance committee and the select board during those times, is this something that you're going to come back and tell us we can't function without these positions after the pandemic because the town can't afford to sustain that? And I remember when I get grilled in front of the finance committee many times, we said, no, we understand that the town won't be able to sustain an increased FTE level. And that's why we've worked really hard to reduce even with our real needs budget.
You've got the largest percentage in town budget, so one of the places where you think you could get some pullback on funding.
Yeah.
I know I read some of the opinions and I read the article in the Clipper, this most recent one. It seemed I felt it was intimidating in that if you don't vote for the 5.8 million override, you're going to be cutting police and fire. Well, I think police and fire is a separate issue. I think that safety is paramount, but there must be other areas in other departments where we can pull 5.8 million.
Yeah, maybe when I'll answer that question then. So when you look at the process that the town manager and the finance director and the department heads embarked on, right, when we were faced with this challenge, right, this fiscal challenge, was basically to look at the activities that each of those departments carried out. And so what we wanted to do was to ensure that we could continue delivering the services, right? So when you have a department that has 2 people in it or 3 people in it, and you cut that department, then you're having obviously a significant impact on that business delivery, right? So so what we've looked at is make sure that we continue delivering the business. So for instance, an HR department, which seems to be the favorite one that everybody wants to cut, they provide a service to both the town and the schools. And if you were to cut 2 of them, basically the services that they provide, right? We are self-insured for health. And actually, because we are self-insured compared to other communities, we save a lot of money. So we've reduced to 50% of the staffing in HR, then we've got no choice but to outsource that health insurance, right? Get somebody else to come in and pay for that. And that increases the expenses. So I think it's been easy to say, cut HR or cut admin or cut finance or cut, it's basically obviously when Chief Reardon turns up to do a job, everybody appreciates him. Everybody loves a fireman. And so but nobody likes HR. Everybody, I haven't, basically everybody hates HR. I come from a business world, and HR were terrible because they didn't allow you to have more money. They didn't allow you to abuse the policies and procedures, right? So they looked at it, I'm being serious here, and they looked at every single department and ensured business continuity, providing the services to the town. And unfortunately, when you look at the town services, the biggest departments with more staffing is fire, police, and DPW. So when they have a reduction, they're not talking about reduction of 50% of their staff. They're talking about reduction or 5%. There will be an impact. Now, I know Chief Reardon, he will do when he's faced with having to reduce 2 fires, he will do his utmost. He will call in mutual aid. He will call in firefighters that are on overtime, right? And he has done that. The police chief will do his utmost. And what he will do, and is what's been impacting him, he will call police officers off basically from home, right? So they increase overtime. So at the end of the day, I know it doesn't look good, right? But I can assure you, and that's why I struggle with it, right? That whole process. But at the end of the day, yes, public safety is the #1 priority, right? But at the end of the day here, we've got to provide a service. And when we look at cuts, the smaller departments like HR or finance or treasury or municipal services, they've only got 1 or 2 people. So you cut there, then you can't produce the services. So long-winded answer. And so that's the explanation as to why we are where we are and the cuts that have been made.
Fernando, before you get into your presentation, can I just say, I think Chief Reardon does an outstanding job advocating for his department when he's showing that we are now at 3 different calls, and we had to call in staff and mutual aid, and you can't rely on mutual aid constantly. I think that becomes a drain on other communities near us. Yeah, it's not mutual. It's not mutual if we can't provide mutual aid to other communities because we are short-staffed. But I will say that a lot of things that happen in the school department, we have really strong social media where it seems like it is all sunshine and roses in the schools. And that's for a reason, and that's for student confidentiality, that we cannot show an accident scene at the school. But I can tell you that our school administrators are responding to emergencies on a daily basis in terms of safety and security, in terms of our social and emotional needs of students, where they're requiring medical services, they're requiring a lot of staff that are able to address their needs. And I cannot go and take a picture of a student in crisis at one of our schools to show the community, here's what our administrators do. I can't be negative in saying, do you see all of our principals and administrators at their 15th night meeting in a 2-month period? Because our teachers are only allowed to work 2 or 3 evenings a year because of their contract. And so the things that go on in the schools behind the scenes, and when we have social media posts that are attacking our administrators and what we're doing, we cannot go on social media and advocate for ourselves because it's inappropriate and unprofessional on our end. And so we find ourselves on the receiving end of a ton of criticism and a ton of people that are telling us how the school should run. And my job, I've been hired by this town, and so is everyone else sitting up here, for our educational expertise and operations, because we have to protect the students and the students' privacy and what they need. And I never want to take a position away from DPW, who are doing so much work. I don't want to take a firefighter away from the fire department because we have extra staff at the schools. And so my job and the school committee's job is to make sure that I'm giving them accurate information of why the staffing is needed at the schools. And we can't do what you do on social media, chief, because it's a totally different ballgame. But our student needs in 2025 are vastly different than when I went to school in the 1980s, and our special education students weren't even visible. You weren't even in the same classroom together, and it was a real shame. That isn't the way schools are today. We're fully inclusive, and our students have really unique needs. And a lot of times there's confidential things that are happening that it's all hands on deck, where we need to have everybody available to come in and kind of help maintain order. And in a situation where we have 3,000 students in a day, that we are operating in a really structured way to get in and out safely. If we don't feel better until every single student is dropped off on the bus in the afternoon, we can take a deep breath. And I don't feel that sense of stress until the last day of school, when every child goes home for the summer. July is the only month that I act like a human being, honestly. And you can ask my family. It's a lot of stress and pressure that we don't want to be in the news. Yesterday, there was a really serious bus accident in Sherborne, and that is not something that we want to have in our community. So safety is our top priority.
And Jim, I have one more question and then I'll shut up.
No, please. That's the whole point of this forum. So we want to ask questions and,
So
yeah.
DEI has been, according to President Trump, removed from schools, and there's funding consequences as a result. And I'm wondering, I know that practice exists here, so what adjustments have you made to anticipate losses of funding at the federal level?
I'm not anticipating losses of funding at the federal level because we don't have a DEI program in our schools. We have a DEI coordinator that also has students that she works with in the school, and the service that she provides families is access to our school programs, access through inclusion, which is our special education department. And we want to make sure that we're not having instances of hate speech, hate acts, or any kind of racism or inappropriate actions in the school department that our town and our select board has made a commitment to not allowing in our community. And so our DEI coordinator grew up in Duxbury, attended Duxbury schools, taught in Duxbury schools, and works with all of our school department to make sure that our school department is one that functions with the values that our community believes in terms of access to education, belonging. We're not doing any kind of DEI programming with our students. We teach the curriculum frameworks only. So I wouldn't imagine that we would be in non-compliance with any federal guidelines that may be coming down if they're looking at school departments that are doing any type of DEI programming for all students, which we're not doing. We simply are trying to follow the values of our strategic plan, our community, in alignment with our select board's commitment to having a welcoming,
Safe and welcoming community. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe Ian, you and I can talk offline about what DEI means to you and what it means to me. So maybe we can have that good. Yeah, it's good.
Anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Great question, Ian. Thank you very much. Right, how much time have we got, Lester?
I used it all. So
It's
I'm
okay.
gonna hand out.
I've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. How much time have I got, Lester? No, seriously.
So let's see, we're gonna end by 11.
End by 11.
Right,
So,
so
okay, all right.
You have 10 minutes before the question. and
We've-
answer starts.
I've got 10 minutes, all right. So-
So you could have 15 or 20.
I can't sit down, by the way, so
Yeah,
can we,
so-
next slide,
Yes.
just,
Okay, you're good.
just keep on going. So basically what I'm trying to cover here is what exactly we're facing. How do we get here is important to understand the context which drives the situation we're in. What are our options? And there's only 2. And then impact on services, which Danielle's covered the schools, I'll cover the towns, and most importantly, what's going to happen to our back pockets, right? So that's what I'm going to try and cover. So what are we facing? We are facing what is called a structural deficit. So basically, this is this graph here. This is the graph where we show fiscal year 25, and basically we have enough money coming into the town to cover the expenditures. Right? Enough money to come in town, but the money coming from town comes from basically 74% of the money comes in from our property taxes, what we pay, the famous levy, the tax levy, the property bills funds 74% of the revenues coming into the town. Of that 74%, when you look at it, 97% is from property taxes. 97% of property taxes. Of that $74 million is from our pockets. Right? We fund that bit. The rest comes from state aid. It comes from local receipts, what we pay for boat excise tax, car tax. When we go to the beach, comes from there. There is 9% comes from state aid, Chapter 17, all that kind of bits and pieces. And Danielle pointed out that state aid is dependent on the wealth and the income of the community. And I'll go and show a slide later on is that we're not exactly a poor community. All right, the house prices, asset values, right? When you look at assessed values, have doubled from 600,000 to $1.2 million. That's the average single family home in Duxbury is worth $1.2 million, right? So, but we were going close, right? So we have the ability, excess levy capacity means that we have the ability to levy tax, but we don't use it all because it matches, we need a balanced budget, right? So we only levy the amount we need to cover our expenditures. So we had just under basically almost $100 million budget. We had about $500,000 worth of excess levy capacity, right? So that was pretty close in 2025. We've been actually playing this game for the past 35 years, and we've been very good at it. However, the time has come. So here we are, fiscal year 26. And what's happened if we continue providing the services we've come to expect and demand from the town, you can see the red bar, which is the expenditures to pay for the services, is greater than the green bar, the revenues. In fact, what we face is a $1.7 million shortfall. We have to find $1.7 million of cuts to be able to balance the budget. Next slide. Okay, so how do we get here? Lots of reasons. Proposition 2.5, right? The ability to levy tax on the residents is capped at 2.5% every year. And is obviously done for obviously good reasons to keep control of what towns spend. A restrictive zoning. We are a beautiful town. We are a residential town. We have a beach, lots of open spaces. We have a wonderful counseling and aging school system. We have a library, wonderful library, recreation. We have everything. It's a great place to live. But that is due to the restrictive zoning that we have made choices that as a town, this is what we like. This is why we come to Duxbury. And we don't have big box stores. We don't have a lot of that stuff, which you see in Norwell, in our surrounding communities, Plymouth, right? It's a residential, historic, beautiful place to live. But obviously, we depend 97% of the revenues that we come in, or the 74% comes in from property taxes. Diminishing state and federal funds, we've kind of covered that. Inflation, we all know the price of eggs, right? I just got a shock. I got my gas bill here for January. I nearly died, right? So yes, inflation, supply chain affects us, obviously affects the town. Labor market, we've covered it. It has been competitive. We've been losing employees of DPW to other community, right? So we have done what we call compensation and classification studies. We are into a second one. The school has done theirs. So what we want to do is to make sure that we are paying a fair price, a competitive salary, for a job well done, right? And so basically we need to ensure that we're competitive in the market, and that obviously impacts the salaries that we pay. Fixed costs, pension contributions continue to impact us. Insurance affects us at home and also at the schools. And my favorite subject, unfunded mandates. Next slide. I love unfunded mandates, right? But this is a good one. So basically, 2 or 3 years ago, the state put in place the police reform law, which basically essentially says any peace officer must be fully trained, competent, and certified. Right, so basically they put together a commission that carries on, that supervises that. So what does that mean? If you carry a gun, you've got to be trained, certified, and competent to do that, which I think is a great thing. I think we all agree that's a good thing. But what happens is it's an unfunded mandate. There's a cost for that. There's a cost for the police officer to go to that training commission, to be able to do this, to be able to demonstrate that he or she is certified and competent to do their job. And so therefore we have to pay them overtime while they're at that training, and then we have to replace that police officer to carry out the duties that the other police officer was doing. We have to pay overtime. So unfunded mandating, we basically the state hasn't given us money to cover for that additional expense. And the final one is, I don't know if you remember Scott Lambesi. He was the municipal services director, and that was his main job. But one day I was at the 4th of July parade. I saw him fully dressed as a police officer, Duxbury police officer, carrying a big gun. And basically he was what they call a special police officer, trained, but not to that level of required by the law. And so therefore that he actually covered, and we paid him $20 an hour compared to $50-60 an hour to do that work, right? So all that has increased and has resulted in increased costs. And apparently the auditor in the state here has identified $1.2 billion in unfunded mandates. And the latest one is that apparently they're saying that the MBTA Communities Act is an unfunded mandate. So there's a lot of things that the state requires to be in place by law, but we don't get the money to be able to cover the additional expense. Next slide. I'm working my way through it. Any questions, please put your hand up. All right, so what are options? They're pretty simple, actually. One is we've got to find $1.7 million. So the only way we do that is the town, as the school, we provide services. Basically, services are provided by people. So we have to find $1.7 million of cuts. Danielle's described them for the schools. This is basically 13 employees in the town. I'll cover in more detail. So that's one choice, and it's called the balanced budget. All right, it's what's called level funded here. We have different terminology between the schools and the town, but bottom line is that's the balanced budget. That's what we're going to call. I'm going to cover. That's 5A. That's the first choice we have as a community. All right, we can save money. It won't impact our property taxes, but it will have an impact on the services. So that's one decision we have a community, or we can basically approve what we call an operational override. So what is the operational override? The $5.8 million, right? It gives us that ability to levy as much as, not as much we want, but increase the levy capacity, right? And so therefore, if we do the 5.8, in 2007, we will have about $1.5 million of excess levy capacity. What does that mean? We have the ability to levy tax, but we don't, if we don't need it, we don't do it, right? We basically have enough money to, it's like having equivalent of excess money in a bank account. We don't spend it, we don't need it, but we have that capacity. And that what gives us is another 5 years, right? Because at some point, with all those drivers I was talking about, we will be back in 2030 facing the same discussion. So we as a community need to sit together and look at both sides of the ledger, right? How much money, the sources of revenue that come in from our taxes, from state aid and everything else like that, and we go look at the services that we require and we demand as a town and figure out, let's do something differently, right? What's the definition of insanity? Trying to do the same thing over and over again, but and expect a different result. So we've got to do something. We've got to think about this as a community. Do we want to change? If not, this is a tough conversation. So that's the option that we face, right? Reduce employees, balance budget, or vote for operational override. Next slide. There we go. So I think we've covered Danielle's done a great job explaining what's going to happen, what could happen in schools. And so I think you've all seen this, but and we talked about it a little bit here. The impact of that reduction is reduction in for 2 firefighters 2 patrol officers in the police, 5 DPW. There is reduction in admin assistants in the select board office and in the municipal services. Library will be closed on Sundays, and there is reduction of 2 finance positions in the town, right? So that's 13 employees that will have to leave the workforce in that case. Next slide. So you will have an Article 5B at the annual town meeting. And basically what that will do, that is in the amount of $4.8 billion, right? What will that do is, most importantly for the school, be able to reinstate those employees and provide universal kindergarten. So basically there's no additional staffing is at the schools, right? I think sometimes it has in the past got a bit confused. No additional staff at the schools and be able to provide universal kindergarten. We're actually recommending within this budget to actually increase the number of employees in the town by 11. So why is that? We want to add, the chief has recommended that we add 4 firefighters to that. All right, so basically if the override passes, that $4.8 billion, we'll be able to obviously maintain those 2 firefighters that were meant to be cut and basically increase staffing by 4. And what's been happening here is that the chief, his target is to be able to respond to an emergency 90% of the time in less than 6 minutes. And there's been struggling to achieve that target. He got close when you added the 3 firefighters about 3 years ago. You got close to that 90%, but since it's dipped down. Why is that? He is staffed the same level, the same way he's been staffed for the past 20 years, right?
If we drop,
If we drop.
we're gonna drop back to where we were.
Okay, we're gonna drop, right. So basically, the number of calls have doubled, tripled.
Since 1979, calls have tripled, we call people 273 times a year.
I got that one, that's right, yeah. So what happens is basically, it always happens, right? When you get an ambulance call, he gets 8 calls a day, right? He doesn't get them nicely spread out over the day. He gets all 8 calls within the hour, right? That's called bad luck, or well, whatever happens, right? But it's simultaneous calls. That's what's really impacting it. The increase in simultaneous calls. So he has to call out 1 ambulance, then he gets another call within a couple of minutes, another ambulance, and so what he does then, he's got no choice. He's got the vehicles. He has to recall his firefighters. They're at home, should be enjoying their rest and recreation. He calls them back. It's overtime. Or he has to call in mutual aid from another town to be able to provide and be able to respond within that 6 minutes. Patrol officer, basically today the police department is a modern day police department. It's completely different to what it was back in the 70s. And so he has the chief has basically the same level of patrol officers that he had back in 1970, but their jobs and the demands of the jobs for today's society, much like the schools, have changed dramatically. In fact, in the old days, you just had 1 police officer would go out and patrol to respond. Now he needs 2. Societies have changed, and he's concerned about public safety, right? For a police officer to go on their own these days. I'm not saying that happens in Duxbury, but he does need to protect that. And so when he's trying to cover a patrol and basically he's short-staffed, what he does, he basically pulls in people from overtime. They should be at home, resting, relaxing. It's fair, but he pulls them back in for overtime. So that's why he's asking for 2 patrol officers. And when I spoke to him, by the way, I said, don't ask for any more for the next 5 years, right? Yeah, I did.
You said multiple times.
I said it multiple times. Don't ask for any more. You've got them all. So facilities, this one is really important actually as well. So why two positions here? All that we do right now in terms of maintaining the 60 buildings that we have, all we do is statutory inspections, which are good things to do. Basically, you inspect fire systems to make sure they work. The elevators are all in conformance. 80% of the time is doing that. 20% is reactive maintenance. What is reactive maintenance? They're like taking your car, and whenever you replace the oil, you ignore it, and you drive that car until the engine seizes. That's what's known as reactive maintenance. You only repair stuff when it breaks. And that's the most expensive form of maintenance that you can do. So basically, by adding those two positions in Katie St. Clair's organization, she can move then to proactive maintenance, preventative maintenance, i.e. doing the oil changes every year as required by that piece of equipment, right? We have a significant number of HVAC equipments, basically air conditioning and heating. When those break down, that's big bucks, right? So we need those two positions to actually basically preserve and maintain the assets that we have and prevent increasing costs. We need to add another planner. Part of that strategy, we need to look at our town and how do we adapt. And so we haven't had a planner in our position for quite some time. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Our beach now is basically, it's no longer a seasonal beach. We're out there 365 days a year. The snowy owls are here. People are running all over the beach on the dunes. We shouldn't be doing that. And so we need basically additional position in there. We've only got one guy, right? One person that manages the beach. Yes, we do hire seasonal staff, but at the end of the day, you need somebody to represent the town to ensure that people are doing what they should be doing. And to get that from a part-time employee that, you know, basically you won't know if you get will turn up next year, just not the way to work. That person needs some time off, right? In the summertime, he's there basically from sunrise to sunset and more, 7 days a week, right? So that's, I'm surprised he hasn't sued us yet. But anyway, moving on. I shouldn't say things like that. Was that recorded?
No, it was.
It was, but deleted. Right. But it's, I'm making a joke, but seriously, you just can't do that, right? So we do recommend an additional person. Can I have the next slide, please? All right. So as I mentioned, I'm going pretty fast, but hopefully it all makes sense, right? We're not alone. In fact, this year it's Hanson, Norwell, Hanover, and Whitman are all also facing an override, right? So you look at the past history, 2020 through 2023, roughly about 20 to 15 towns in Massachusetts are going through the same position we're going in right now. There has been an increase for the obvious reasons that I've talked about. There's been an increase in other towns facing the same position that we're in. So we are not alone. We don't want to be here, but at the end of the day, that's reality, and that's where we are, right? But we're not alone. Next slide, please. Right. So I've covered what our choices are. $1.7 million worth of reduction. Article 5A, reduction in schools, reduction in the town services, significant. Or we vote for the override. So if we vote for the override, what will happen? It will impact our tax bills. So this is the average family home in Duxbury, now worth $1.2 million. The tax bill will go up just under $1,000 a year. You can see here, as I was mentioning before, 2010 through 2018, the average single family home was assessed at $600,000. Duxbury's are very low. People have found out ever since COVID that Duxbury's a nice place to come and live in. And so therefore the house price has doubled and the tax bill, right, has gone from just over $6,000 to $12,000 a year for that single family home. You can see the impact here back in 2013, 2014. That's when we voted in the debt override for the schools, for the fire station and the police station. But essentially, that's what's happening to us, right? If we vote for the override, there will be an increase in your tax bill for that. It works out about 8%. The next slide. All right, so I think this is important. Is that the tax bill? That's just an average. I'm just using the average from the previous slide, but this is really important. Before you go to the annual town meeting, do this. All right, go into the homepage, town's homepage, and you see up there GIS maps. Click GIS maps. You go to that page, and then you click that one. You'll go to the assessed value. And I've done that. I put in my type in my address, and I look at the assessed value, because ultimately, the tax bill is based on your house value. Right, I typed it in there, and I found out my assessed value for last year has gone up quite significantly, and I realized what the hell's going on here? And I realized that I replaced the roof and I replaced windows. Kind of makes sense, right? So my house is valued more because if I sell it, I can reclaim the cost of that. If I don't do that, then my house price is going to be less because they say, hey, you got a bad roof and those windows are rotted, right? So this was going to happen is the estimated tax rate with the override is going to be $10.94 per $1,000 of assessed value. So type in your address, find out your assessed value, write it in there, divide it by 1,000. This is a good math class, right? Divide it by 1,000 times 10.94, you'll get your estimated tax bill. So I think it's really important that you do that before the town meeting, so that when you do vote, you fully understand the implications on your back pocket. All right, so the next slide is a really complicated one, which I'm not allowed to go through. And why is that? Is basically, it just reinforces that the property tax bill, your bill is driven by the assessed value of your house. All right, and it doesn't always go up 30%, as everybody says it does. Sometimes it actually goes down. So if you're interested to find out why it goes down, that slide is available and hopefully easy to go through. But if you have trouble going through it, please get in touch.
There's also many other recordings of you going.
There are many
recordings. That information is available.
So that's a kind of way to just shut up and move on, right? So,
Thank you, Fernando.
it was a nice way of saying it. Debt, obviously, it's quite, there's debt. No, we're building a DPW, a new DPW facility. We're just about finishing the seawall. So there is additional debt coming on, right? That will also impact. So the override, yes, it will impact your property tax bill, but I just want to be complete transparency. I think we as a select board don't want people to say, well, you didn't tell us about the other stuff that's coming on. So there's other things that will be impacting your tax bill. Obviously, debt that we've approved, right? As a town, we've approved that we'll be paying additional amounts of money in there. There is also the water rate study, and the water fees will be going up as a result. We need to invest in the future. We haven't done so. We haven't increased rates for 16 years, and we're behind in what we should be doing. So just complete transparency is not you'll see an impact on your back pocket, not just because of the override. Next slide. So what's going to happen at annual town meeting? You'll have the two articles. Article 5A is going to be called the omnibus budget, which is essentially the balanced budget, which is essentially the $1.7 million worth of cuts. That's what 5A. We have to vote on that. I recommend that you vote 5A because bottom line, if the override doesn't pass, we need money anyway, right? We need to have a budget available, right? What's the important point I didn't mention right at the beginning was that at the end of the day, the select board can only recommend a budget. The school committee can only recommend a budget. The finance committee can only recommend the budget. It is us turning up at the annual town meeting that actually approves the budget. Right? We approve a budget. So we do need to vote yes on Article 5A because we do need to at least have money, not as much as we would like, to be able to operate the town. We may not like the way it's being distributed and allocated, but we have to vote positively for 5A. And then that's where the choice comes in. The second article, 5B, which is the one for $4.8 million. All right, and there's a bit there at the bottom of when you see the warrant, there'll be there'll be an excess levy capacity of $1 million, and you'll see the 5.8. That budget includes that contingency budget, the override budget includes the 11 positions that we've been talking about, and the restoration of all the positions plus universal kindergarten for the schools. So that's the choice. Be voting 5A, you'll be voting 5B. Next slide. So that's the 5A, 5B at town meeting. And then on the town election, there'll be a ballot which says basically vote yes or no for the override of $5.8 million. So it's a two-step process. And I, as a public official, can state my view. And I've been through, I have been involved in the whole process or participated in understanding and developing an understanding as I've gone through it, is the hard work that the town has done, our town manager, our finance director, and all department heads. They've really faced a very difficult place to be, right? Recognizing that we have a structural deficit. We do need to produce a balanced budget that's required by law. And so therefore they've had to have that difficult conversation. So there's $1.7 million worth of employees right now wondering whether they have a job or not. Okay. And what I've recommended, or what the select board is recommending, is Article 5B, kind of reflects the needs of the town. It reinstates all the employees and to the schools, and allows to provide universal kindergarten to continue the good work the schools are doing, but also increase the number of staffing to the town to really kind of reflect the needs of the town, to ensure that we can provide the services and we're effective and efficient. At the end of the day, we don't want to basically operate, for instance, in the maintenance area, run the car dry, no oil, and let the engine seize. We don't want to do that, right? And we want to make sure that the fire chief has more than enough people and to be able to meet that target of 6 minutes and 90% of the time. So I, as a select board member, are recommending that you vote positively, that you vote for 5B and vote positively at the town election. So with that, I shall put Q&A.
Questions?
Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Anybody have any questions? So then I have my first one. Can you explain the difference between what we're voting for at town meeting and what we're voting for at the ballot?
Yeah.
They're different, right?
Yeah.
What we're actually,
Yeah.
the action we're taking is
Yeah,
different.
they actually, so basically, although it says 5.8, the actual Article 5B is basically funding for those 11 positions and restoration of all the positions at the school plus the kindergarten. That's $4.8 million. $2.6 million is for the schools and $2.2 million is for those positions in the town. So you will be appropriating, if you vote positively, $4.8 million. At the ballot, you'll be voting for that 5.8, basically the override, right? So if I go back to the very beginning slide. No, right the other way,
Oh, I went
sorry.
the wrong way, sorry.
Yeah, yes, okay.
Which one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, that's it right there. So what you're voting for is basically to give us the ability to have excess levy capacity, right? To be able to have the capacity to be able to pay for future expenditures, to not go every year and have the same conversation. Because if the override doesn't pass, we are going to be sitting here having the same conversation. Right? And it's not good for, quite frankly, again, we've got to look two sides, right? I know it impacts our bottom line, property taxes, but it also impacts employees of the town, right? So do you want to work for Chief Reardon not knowing whether you have a job or not? And usually, because it's unionized, it's the first guy that came in gets kicked out. So you're sitting there with a target on your back. That's not a good place to work.
So I think also
Yeah.
just to add,
Yes, sorry.
next year,
Yeah.
if the override doesn't pass,
Yes.
we will sustain all the reductions that we're showing in the level funded budget.
Yeah.
Or the balanced budget.
Yeah,
And next year, we'll be sitting here saying on top of the 30 positions that were lost.
Yeah.
Now we're proposing as department heads, another 30 positions, because we'll be in exactly the same boat next year, where the revenues will not be able to support next year's budget, so.
in fact, when Norwell, Hanover, sorry, I keep on getting mixed up.
Can I just talk about them? real
You
quick?
betcha.
So real quickly, I just want to talk about Hanover. If you've done any research on them, I have. I'm personal friends with their fire chief. Their override got voted down last year and they're in a horrible position. They've already lost their 3 firefighters. I can tell you, no one's signing up to be a firefighter there. No interest. If anything, people are jumping ship. They're getting ready to jump because this year they're going for another override. If they don't get it, they lose more firefighters. There's that trickle down thing. You know, it's like Dr. Klingaman said, they can't be all flashy like we can, you know, they can't put stuff on social media, but they're not the only ones. HR, there's so many other departments. And that trickle down, we all work together, every one of these department heads, And if, I know it's easy to say, well, why are we laying off firemen? Why are we laying off, more HR and IT? And it's just like they said, there's been so much work behind the scenes. I know I was brought into these meetings with the town manager, and there's been a lot of thought involved in this. And a lot of these people that you see on social media that you want to lay off, it's like Wizard of Oz. They're behind the curtain doing a lot of stuff. You don't see them out there. You don't see HR every day, but unfortunately, they had jobs that some people don't like. They get rid of our employees that might not be working out well in the town. So those are the people that aren't going to jump up and down for HR, but HR supports me for hiring. They support me for mental health for my people, our benefits. They do so much. There's so much we can't tell you that these departments do to support us. The school department, I had to work with Danielle. It was a few weeks ago. It was 7:30 at night. We had a grant opportunity. I needed to work with her administrators so I can get that funding so that we can go into the schools. There's so much that we do with each other and work with each other that people don't realize. And I appreciate everybody taking the time to come here and to get the facts yourself. Because what I've found is people who get involved with the finance committee and fiscal advisory, they come in with the idea, we are going to cut because there's a lot of facts. And then after about a year or so, and you get to go and meet every department head and you spend some time, because I welcome people, come on in and I'll show you, there's nothing to hide. And if anything, I think you'll start to get on that boat of these departments are actually understaffed, don't probably have the resources they need. But again, I appreciate all your time. I probably went off.
In fact, I'm sure Katie St. Clair won't mind me repeating what she told me, right? But just before the forum there, she came from Hingham. And she was really surprised. She had a decent budget in Hingham. And when she came to Duxbury, she says, oh my God, I've got nothing.
She thought that she had budget constraints in Hingham, and when she came here, she's like, I didn't have budget
Constraints in Hingham, that's what she said. So anyway, I think the message is if you ever watched any of the finance committees, especially this last few ones in there, right? The harbor master came in his best suit, right? Not even in his harbor master, in his best suit to fight for $100, right? So there's every single person, I'm convinced, and I support, and I know that they do that. Every penny they spend, they know where it comes from. And for them, it comes out their own back pocket, right? They treat and respect that money that we give them through our property taxes. They treat it with respect. They really do. Yes.
So just to clarify
Yeah.
Martha's question that
Yes.
led into this, the two different votes that we need to do
Yeah.
on the 8th and then on the 22nd,
Correct.
the override for
Yeah.
the 5.8.
Yes.
If that gets approved, then going to the 22nd.
Yeah.
That is then dividing the 4.6, the 4.8 into current services and giving us the million for the backup. What is the difference between the two? That's what's
Yeah,
happening,
that's
right?
what's happening.
Once we get that approved, then
Yes.
we're dividing.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not dividing it, but we're allowing us to have backup, right? Backup
Because
to,
otherwise,
yeah.
if it gets approved on the 8th,
Yeah.
and it doesn't get approved on the 22nd, what happens?
that's a great question. And I wish I had the finance director, because that's one that's been asked. Because this whole process, I have not been involved in it before. Neither has none of our select board members have. And that's changed a bit. So I think both,
Rainey's offering
Rainey's
to
in the
answer
back.
Yeah, the answer to that question is this. First, is the appropriation 5 days.
Hey, Rainey, I don't think folks on the Zoom can hear you.
Yeah.
Step up to the owl. On down.
Step up to the owl. It's Friday.
The first answer is 5A is the appropriation. It allows us to have the money. 5B, excuse me, back. The 8th is the appropriation. The 22nd is the authorization. So we all as voters will sit there and say, yes, we agree with these expenditures. The 5B, we agree with it. Now, the next step is to get the authorization from the voters to actually spend that money.
Right, to spend it in those areas. Okay.
And it will be up to $5.8 million. The amount that we will appropriate is only 4.7. The reason for that additional million plus is the sustainability aspect. I created a sustainability budget task force a year ago because we needed to build in headroom to be able to get us over the next 5, 6, 7 years. So that $1 million doesn't mean we're going to tax all the way up to it. Gives us the ability to do so in future years if we need to. The idea is not to go from 4.7 to 5.8 overnight. We would do it gradually if necessary.
The question is-
See on the ballot, what will the ballot look
The
like?
ballot is going to say $5.8 million.
You only have to vote on one number
That's
at the election.
But what
It's not gonna be
happens,
broken down.
what happens if they approve?
If it's not approved, it's over. It's done.
Wait. So basically, let's be clear, right? So even if the town meeting votes positively, yes, for 5 B. And says they're gonna appropriate $4.8 million. If on March 22nd, people say no, that Article 5B goes away because we don't have the money.
It fails, that's correct.
And
That's, right, so that's why
Yeah.
I feel like
No,
the lot's pushed for the eighth, and I
Yeah,
want to
right.
clarify that we.
the two needs,
Right.
the two needs to work together.
Two-step process. It's not just one and done.
Huge. Yeah.
Can I just ask one, I think I understand this piece, but I wanna try to ask and help maybe make it clear.
Yeah.
When you went through the calculation of what the impact would be on the tax bill, right? And
Yeah.
like the average home is worth $1.2 million, it's gonna cost around $1,000.
Yeah.
That $1,000 is calculated on the 5.8 million. So day one, right,
Yeah.
so for next year,
Yes, it
you
is.
probably, it won't
Yes.
So it
even
won't
be
be
that
that.
whole
No,
amount. It'll be
no.
something less because
Something
we
less.
only need the
Yes.
4.8, and
Yeah.
it's just giving us the ability over time,
And
right?
That's an excellent
estimated
point.
figure.
Estimated
Yeah, it's
figure.
less than that,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah, so it's, but
Yeah.
the point I guess I'm trying to make for people to understand is
Yeah.
you may not have that full effect
Right.
Correct.
every year. It
Yeah.
will gradually go up to that amount,
That's-
depending on the needs, right? That just gives you the levy capacity
Levy
to
capacity,
get up to there,
correct.
but.
If we so wish as a community.
Yeah.
And it, like Rennie says, it is sustainable. We have the ability to be in control,
Yep.
so to speak, right? As a town, and gives us an opportunity to really come back to really things
Yeah.
strategic.
Just
Yeah, yeah.
making sure.
And on that note, the sustainability aspect isn't just about money. The reason that Rob is asking for 4 firefighters and not 3, not 2, not 1, is to be able to have that sustainability over the course of many years. Same is true with the
Yeah.
police department. That's why they're asking for 2 officers, not 1. So that's the reason.
Danielle?
Martha, I know you probably have another question, but the other night at the forum, somebody in town asked if voting yes on an override would then give the town the opportunity to tax its citizens at a higher rate than 2.5% after this year. And I thought that was a really important question. And so I think if Fernando can answer that, the
Yeah.
answer is no. This is a
Right.
one-time more than 2.5% would be taxed. This would not be something that's opening the floodgates for now. The taxpayers could have any kind of increase year after year.
It's a one-time increase in the levy capacity, and the levy capacity goes up 2.5% every year.
Yeah.
As before, the levy always goes up by 2.5%. The capacity to the ability to tax always goes up by 2.5%. We're gonna jump it up by that 5.8 million, and then it goes up 2.5% a year and the year after. Thank you.
Excellent point. Okay. So there's been a lot of questions about process. And I don't want to get too deep in this, but
Yeah.
people are confused about how is this gonna happen at town meeting? What's gonna be put in front of us and how will it go down? Oh, Brady's coming back.
So you've got 2 articles. Actually, if you go online, you can look at the warrant. It's all there. And there are 2 articles. 5A lists all, I'll call it 100 lines. We've got 100 lines in the budget. So every one of them has a salary and expenditure line, every department, with the exception of the school. Betsy will read off each of those lines. Betsy, the finance committee chair, Betsy. So, and the voters will be given the opportunity to hold a line if they have questions about it. And that's what we'll do through 5A. Now, remember, 5A is the budget that has the cuts in it. So people will have questions, I'm sure. And we'll be fair to answer whatever they may be.
So can you just go into detail, explain how that works?
Yeah, here, so we got.
Other questions?
Yeah, so stop right there. So
Is
somebody
this
may
it?
take.
That's the,
Oh, sorry, that's right.
4A.
Oh, this-
Keep on going.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh,
get
that's
to 5.
fine, sorry. Okay, so that's where
5A,
it starts.
Go down. There it is, right there.
All right.
Yeah.
So they might say, Betsy might say, okay, line 13, salaries, treasurer collector, in the amount of whatever it is. So it's 318,000. Somebody may say, hold. And she'll keep reading and go through the whole list of 99, and then we will come back and address any of the questions that the voters may have with respect to those lines. They may say, what's in this? What's this for? How many cuts are in the department? Or whatever questions they may have, and we will address them. And then they will be given the opportunity whether to take that number as it stands or make modifications to it. To make a modification to it would require a motion to do so.
Okay.
Same.
And then we debate that, and then we vote on that motion
Yeah.
at that time.
But it's clear, if you wanna add or delete, if you wanna take money, if you wanna add money to a department, you gotta find another source.
You have to cite a funding source.
Get to find something, it's really important, right? You can't say, I wanna increase this guy, but not provide any money, right? You have to, at the end of the day, this is your budget. Right, and it must be balanced at the end for 5A. So if you wanna add somewhere, you're gonna take from somewhere else. That's the whole conversation we've been through, right? We've got to balance the budget, we got to get to that number at the bottom of the page. So if you wanna add to one side, you gotta take from somewhere else.
It becomes an exercise in addition and subtraction.
Yeah.
Right.
You're gonna add to something, you have to subtract from something.
And that's always been the case for us, right? But now 5B is gonna be a little different.
Right, it's a little different.
Five B will be a little different. It's a little more focused because it
Yeah.
only deals with those lines in which we have proposed increases, which then compromise the sustainability aspect of the budget. So with respect to the accounting department, I'll just use that as an example. Line 8, salaries, that restores the position. And the people will decide whether or not they want to do that. The expenses, there are ancillary expenses in the department. These will everything in 5B will be listed out as a handout so people can know what it is they're purchasing, if in fact they want to do so. I'm in the process of putting that all together now. So you'll see this in a handout with another column on the right that says exactly what it is. So it will hopefully be very clear.
Yeah, so the facilities management is gonna basically be those two positions I was talking about.
Pretty much, that's it.
And there's obviously additional expenses because of that maintenance that we need to do.
And then the police line and the salaries, that would be the 2 additional police officers, and the expenses would be the equipment needed to outfit. The same is true with the fire. That's 4 positions in the fire department, along with all of the equipment necessary to outfit that.
So 5B, then you have an option to, we'll go through each line. Somebody will say hold and they can say, take it off. I don't want that person, and make a motion. And then we vote as a community, add or subtract. But we don't have to
Can
find
they
it, we don't have to find the funding source. We can just subtract
If
here.
Because this is all part of the deal.
So they could also add without having to,
Yeah, they could,
right? Because it's,
they could.
as long as it stays within the 5.8 in theory, right?
They have to stay within the
We
5.8,
could
yes.
add 6.
We could add $1 million.
Yeah, we could add $1 million. If you go down, if you go
I
down.
took this in a weird way. I didn't mean to take this. in a
No, it's good.
direction.
Can you go down, can you scroll down? I just want to go down a couple of things.
Yes, go down to the bottom
Go down to the very bottom.
of that.
Keep on
Numbers
going,
budget.
keep on going, keep on going. Yeah, here it is, right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's you said 4.7, but I rounded it up to 4.8.
That's fine.
It's okay.
It is.
I just want to make sure there's 2 different numbers going on there. So that is the excess levy capacity, the $1 million I was talking about. All right, and then that's the 5.8, the total override that. Yes, sir.
Is there a way to expand on individual line items? To go into more detail?
Yes, that's
That's
what,
what I'm doing. I'm putting a handout together so everybody will know exactly what it is. It's in each one of those lines.
Oh.
So there'll be in the handout, there'll be another column that explains what's in.
Ian, as you know, the town plays open face poker and we have 3 years. It used to look like this, by the way. Before I got here, there were 6 motions that were made. And it was all bifurcated into government function. So you would have public safety, school, general government, fixed costs, and there were 2 other categories. When I got here, I said, let's blow it up and show it to everybody. So now you get 100 lines. We are now victims of our own success because in doing so, now when we do this. But I think it's better. I live here and I always liked it this way better when I saw it in other communities. You actually get to see what's in every department line. Now, that's harder for department heads in some cases because it really exposes things. But it also makes the department heads acutely aware of what it is they have to prepare. And again, we're very forthright with everything we do and really expands the amount of information given to the voters when they're making the decision. And to me, that's critical. Because there's no shell game here. I didn't want to hide anything. I thought it was just a better way to do it. It's worked out pretty well so far. It takes longer to do it, but things that are worth that should take longer. And when they talk about transparency, aside from sitting in the room when we go through this, we couldn't get more transparent. I've been that way for 11 years.
An additional line item on the date of the 22nd and it would, and can you break it, will you be able to break it down even further on the 22nd?
yeah, you're gonna,
No.
On the 22nd, we
5.8
can.
million and that's it.
no,
Individual line item, 22nd. If you want more clarity, is there gonna be a way to you delve into that.
Do you mean the ballot?
On the
Ballot.
22nd?
No.
No, it's not a menu.
No, it's
It's not
just a
many.
question.
There are several different kinds of overrides and we would not do the menu. This is hard enough already because we're seeing that this is pitting departments against each other and that was never the intention. We do this as a town and school, all as one. This does give people the opportunity to do that, to kind of go grocery shopping. Not preferred, it's the best way, but it is the legal way.
Ms. Magny?
Will that interest, so when you're gonna add the third line, so maybe if this would answer the question too, will that information all be on the website until the 22nd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so maybe you could look at it, that, you know, before you want.
Before that, we'll upload it.
Everything Fernando has shown you, everything Danielle has shown you, everything we're talking about now is all on the website. It has been for weeks.
And
It's a
your
lot to
new,
digest.
and your new line item.
And you itemize, it's
Yeah,
gonna be.
yeah,
on the
my
website.
list will be there. It's actually out there right now in a different fashion, but I'm trying to make it really easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
Great.
So I know we gotta wrap it up. If anybody on Zoom wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do that. And I know that this is probably a question that no one can answer, but it keeps getting posed, which is besides process, what's timing? Like, what are we thinking about on at town meeting? Like,
How many days will it go? Well, the
and what
answer-
time of the day, right? I mean, what time, like, you have a sense of what time does 5A come up, right? What time is 5B?
Here's what I can tell you. We've got 7 articles in the special town meeting and that'll kick off at 9:10. Those shouldn't take a whole lot of time. Now that I've said that, they'll take 7 hours, but I would expect that we would be into the budget probably around 11-ish. Noon. How long will town meeting take? I give the same answer to WATD that I do every year. Tell me who's in the room and I'll tell you how long it takes.
Lunch is served.
Yeah, we're
Oh,
serving
there'll be a
lunch.
break.
Yeah.
Hey, but can-
We thought of not doing that to keep people really focused, but then I thought.
Yeah, that they get hangry. You don't want them hangry.
Exactly.
What night will the
Angry
meeting
voter.
continue on to if the meeting, what
Monday
time
night.
will the meeting wrap up in the day on
Usually
Saturday?
around 5, and then we have to continue going to Monday night.
Hey, Danielle, I'm not sure if you're the right person, but last time they didn't have the pulled pork sandwiches.
Want me to request pulled pork?
I'd really appreciate it.
I will put in the word.
Thank you.
They're really good.
They're delicious, they really are. Makes going to annual town meeting worthwhile.
Yes. drop it out.
Now, the schools don't put that bill that's paid for by the people that are eating it.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Cash only. Cash.
I'm perfectly happy to pay over and above my pulled pork sandwich.
All right, well, we
But
did say we're gonna be done at 11 and there doesn't seem to be any questions on Zoom. I really appreciate everybody's attention and say, I thought it was a great conversation. So we recorded it so that we can save it. We'll put it on the library website. The PTA and PTOs will share it too, and we'll get as much attention as we can.
Yeah. Danielle, I keep on getting questions with regards to the forums, the 2 forums that you hosted. And I know that
Yes.
you're compiling the
Yes.
videos. When do you think they'll be
So
available?
they're working on getting those videos to you all so that they can be posted. And I thought they were shared yesterday. And if they weren't shared yesterday,
Okay.
then I will get back to everyone to get them up today.
Thank you very much, Danielle.
Excellent,
That's
thanks.
good, thank you.
Yeah, I saw some of those YouTube videos and they're so good.
Oh, thank you.
They're so cute.
All right.
Thanks for doing
Well,
that.
thank you very much for coming along and asking those
Thank you,
questions.
thank you guys so
And
much.
thank you all for coming. It's been
Yeah,
really
it's
helpful,
been really helpful.
all of you. Yeah, thank you.
Laurel and I wanted to